On the 26th of July 2024, the Paris Olympic Games began with an opening ceremony attended by the National Olympic Committees, heads of state, sovereigns, and members of the government of the French Republic. However, it's not the first time that the French capital city of Paris has hosted the Games. The French capital held the Games a century ago, in the summer of 1924. The Games would have been a very different insight to see, especially with the many participants who have taken part. But did you know that there was one American tennis player who boarded the Titanic that would go on to play in the Games? While it's believed that a few first-class passengers were Olympians, none were as inspirational as this incredible player. So in honour of the Paris Olympic Games, we will be focusing on the story of American tennis player Richard Norris Williams. Richard Norris Williams was born on the 29th of January 1891 in Geneva, Switzerland. When he was growing up in Switzerland, his father, Charles Dune Williams, would coach Williams in the sport while receiving his education. He is known to have spoken multiple languages, fluent in German, French, and English. While he began to play tennis at the age of 12, Williams began his first European tennis tournaments at the age of 20, when he won the Singles Championship of Switzerland and the French Indoor Singles Championship. In 1912, Williams and his father were on their way to the United States. The purpose of this trip was to go on a United States tennis tour and for Williams to begin studying at Harvard University. But in March 1912, the duo postponed their original plans as Williams came down with the measles. Upon recovery, Williams and his father spent a day in Paris to attend an opera and visit the Tennis Club de Paris. The gentleman then took a train to Cherbourg, where Williams got acquainted with another tennis player, Carl Burr. They boarded the Titanic at Cherbourg on the 10th of April, but before boarding the tender ship, the SS Normandic, Williams would write a letter to his mother. "Dear good things, Father is writing to you just opposite me, but as he will not tell you any news, I shall just tell you what this boat looks like. The room in which we are is about as big as the National Dining Room, and it is not the biggest on the boat. We have a beautiful room nearby as big as my room in Geneva." Of course, this was written before boarding, so Williams and his father didn't know which cabin they'd be staying. Once on board, it was believed that Williams and his father stayed in D18 on B deck. Following the iceberg collision on the night of the 14th of April, Williams and his father dressed warmly before heading to the first-class closed bar to inquire about the situation. On the way to the closed bar, Williams had rescued a group of women who were trapped in a jammed cabin door. Hearing the cries for help, Williams had put his shoulder to the panels and broke it in. Williams was scolded by a steward who threatened him to have him arrested for destroying White Star Line property. Why does this sound so familiar? After the rescue, Williams and his father made it to the bar, where they were told by another steward that the bar was closed. However, having retrieved a fur coat and an empty flask from their cabin, they continued to find someone and ended up in the gymnasium. While waiting in the first-class gymnasium, Williams decided to pedal on the stationary bike to stay warm and had assistance from the ship's physical educator, Thomas McCrawley, advising him not to wear a lifebelt while riding as it could slow him down. When the situation became apparent, Williams and his father remained on the boat deck, where they assisted women and children into the lifeboats. However, before the breakup and the final plunge, the gentlemen headed over to the captain's bridge and together they were pulled out to sea. In the sea, or rather in the North Atlantic Ocean, Williams would witness a terrifying sight when the first giant funnel crashed into the sea. This funnel had crashed Charles Williams to his death, and the vibration of the funnel landing into the waves led Williams to travel further away from the Titanic. Williams had managed to find a lifeboat and survive the night. In the aftermath of the disaster, he would give various accounts from the death of his father to reaching collapsible lifeboat A. In one resource about his father, Williams would write, "I saw one of the 4 great funnels come crashing down on top of him. Just for one instant, I stood there transfixed, not because it had only missed me by a few feet. Curiously enough, not because it had killed my father, for whom I had a far more normal feeling of love and attachment. But there I was, transfixed, wondering at the enormous size of this funnel, still belching smoke. It seemed to me that 2 cars could have been driven through it side by side." In another resource, in the form of a letter he wrote to Colonel Archibald Gracie, Williams wrote, "I was not underwater very long, and as soon as I came to the top, I threw off the big fur coat. I also threw off my shoes. About 20 yards away, I saw something floating. I swam to it and found it to be a collapsible boat. I hung onto it and after a while got on board and stood up in the middle of it. The water was up to my waist. About 30 of us clung to it." Before sunrise, Williams and a few occupants on collapsible lifeboat A were picked up by 5th Officer Harold Lowe, who was in command of lifeboat number 14. Sadly, out of the 30 people, only 11 survived. After boarding the Carpathia, Williams was seen by the Carpathia's doctor. The doctor examined his legs as Williams had suffered from several frostbites. Having seen Williams's legs, the doctor thought that there was no hope and he suggested that the only solution was to amputate both legs. Williams was having none of it, replying that he was going to need these legs. Determined to walk again, Williams would walk around the deck every 2 hours before the Cunard liner reached New York City on the 18th of April. 6 weeks after the disaster, Williams would play the US Tennis Championship in the mixed doubles and won. He also won his first singles at the US Nationals. Williams went on to live a fascinating life, studying and graduating at Harvard, enlisting in the US Army during the First World War, and participating in more competitions, including winning a gold medal at the 1924 Olympics in, you guessed it, Paris. Williams retired from tennis in 1934 at the age of 44, and after retirement he became an investment banker, but the frostbite injury on his legs would catch up to him as he would constantly struggle with blood circulation, which would result in many rehabilitation and therapy sessions. Williams died of lung disease on the 2nd of June 1986 at the age of 77. Richard Norris Williams' story has become an inspiration to the sporting industry, having the courage to carry on with life. His tennis career and survival on board the Titanic can teach us that no matter what the outcome would be after a tragedy, life has to go on, and the only way to do it is to believe in yourself. If Williams was alive today, he would certainly be cheering on many US tennis players in the Paris Olympic Games in 2024.